adventures. I hope you're enjoying your Geo Pro camper. I just wanted to talk to you again about another alteration we did to our camper. It's a 2019 19 FBS Geo Pro made by Rockwood. And early on we didn't really pay attention to it, I don't think, because we were new to camping, and we didn't quite pick up on it until we had camped a few times and had to wash some dishes. But the sink is quite small, and so we noticed that we'd seen a few people talk about replacing their sink and making it a bigger sink. And it's such a small sink. I'm gonna show a picture of the original sink and you'll see the difference. And so basically you could put a couple plates and a few pieces of silverware and a couple cups, but there was no room really to lay something down in the sink and wash it. And so we got tired of that after a while and decided we need to upgrade this sink to make it more useful. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some pictures of the sink installed and talk about some of the things that we did to get that set up. So here's the larger sink that we installed, and you'll notice that it doesn't leave a large margin on the left edge or the right edge. There's still some margin there to set something, but of course if you go with a bigger sink, it's going to take up a little bit more of your cabinet space. And so you'll notice though the depth of this sink, it's a pretty nice depth, where you can get some stuff in there and wash multiple things and get them all down in the water. And unlike the original sink that was really kind of tiny. And so I also wanted to mention to you, we got this faucet. Everyone has different preferences on faucets. It's turned out pretty nice. The other thing is it reaches out over pretty far into the sink, which is really nice when you're trying to rinse or wash dishes, as opposed to a faucet that's very short and just barely reaches over the back edge of the sink. And now I'd like to show you a few things about the installation that may depend on what you do. If you do something like this, you might find that your sink is a slightly different size and it may not be required. But one thing I did is this you see this little cabinet door here on the front? This used to be a little drawer that it would pivot open on an angle just a little bit, and there was a little plastic like a little retention area inside that door, not really a drawer. And you could put maybe some type of utensil in there, something small. And so what I found was when I installed the new sink, it was so close to that would no longer really close properly. So what I did is I removed that little plastic thing off the back, and I just screwed the door shut so that that way it wouldn't be popping open. You couldn't really store hardly anything in there anyways, and we felt like the sink brought us more value than this tiny little drawer. So I removed this drawer so that I could show you something underneath. And on these drawers, notice this little rail that sticks out on each side. On the side of the drawer where it slides into this rail, there's a little plastic lever. And if you raise that little plastic lever up or down on both sides, you can just slip the drawer out of these two drawer slides. But what I want to show you is inside. So looking underneath the cabinet, I'm going to give you a view up here of where the plumbing goes up to the faucet. Notice on the right side, the red and the blue PEX pipes. So what I ended up doing is I wasn't going to keep the original faucet, and they didn't have any valves. And I don't know about you, but if I have to do any future work on a sink, I really feel like there ought to be a valve there so I can shut that water off, only affect that sink. And so basically what I did is I added 2 valves when I put the new faucet in. And that way also, if you ever had any reason to, you could shut off just the sink if you didn't want to disconnect your water and relieve the pressure on your water line. It's up to you. It's just an extra thing I did. I thought that was helpful. And I also found, if you look at this drain pipe, even though we increased the size of the sink with a minor adjustment to that drain pipe, I was still able to connect that drain pipe to the new sink, even though the center was in a slightly different position. It has some give in the pipe there, but the pipe that slides inside the other pipe towards the back, then it has a little nut that you tighten down by hand. That pipe you're able to, if you had to slide it back, you could shorten the length of it a little bit in case that's what your setup turns out to be. One other important note about the sink and preparing to cut it, sometimes they come with a template. You can lay that template on the counter and mark the counter either with some type of a wax pencil or something that is not going to stay on there, or you can use some tape to mark where you need to cut, or tape the template on and cut around the template. There's several ways you could do that. But one thing you might want to think about doing is taking some painter's tape or something and put on the good side of the cut where the counter is going to remain, to protect that from both the saw as it goes around and potentially any chipping, because when I cut this countertop, I did find that it did have a slight chipping from the saw blade in a couple places. So if you don't want that chip, you don't have a chipped countertop edge right under the edge of your new sink. And so that's another precaution you might want to take. Another thing to think about is centering this within the cabinet itself, not on the top. So you're going to have to look at the underside once you take your drawer out. Look at how big the opening is, how far is it over to the stove, and how far is it over to the right side of the cabinet on the end and the front and back, to position it properly so you don't run into issues with your mounting hardware. Because under the sink there's some mounting hardware and it takes a slight amount of space. Usually they're like these screws that slide on a little rail underneath that sink, and as you tighten those screws down, it presses a little clamp up against the underside of the cabinet or the countertop. And so it's important to think about your positioning to allow yourself the proper room all the way around, and in addition, of course, your plumbing hookup for your drain and your faucet. I thought you guys might get a kick out of seeing the original sink inside the new sink, to give you an idea of the difference in the size. So you can tell that although the original sink has a border around it, like a margin that sits on top of the cabinet surface, it still fits all of it well within the new sink. And so we gained quite a few inches in both width and depth, and this really made a big difference on our camper. So if it's something you want to try and you have those skills, have at it.